Hello and happy Imbolc or almost Imbolc. My name is Shannon, and it's nice to meet you here on this little virtual space. I am a shamanic practitioner, and I am specifically trained in Irish Celtic shamanic ancestral practices, and that is where the celebration of Imbolc comes from. So I'm going to share with you what Imbolc is and how you can meet Imbolc and celebrate Imbolc if you would like to. So Imbolc is what's known as a cross quarter day. So cross quarter days are days between the equinox and the solstice. So let me show you this actually. This is really helpful. So this is a wheel of the year. And you can see, we have the winter solstice, which happens around December 21st. We have the summer solstice, which happens around June 21st. And then you have the autumn equinox, which is usually around September 21st. And you have the spring equinox, which is usually around March 21st. So those are our solstices and equinoxes every year. Two solstices, two equinoxes, always. And what happens is between each of the solstices and the equinoxes, we have cross quarter days. So we have 4 cross quarter days a year. And these days are when the sun is basically exactly between the solstice and the equinox, or the equinox and the solstice, on its path, through our seasons. So, for example, between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, we have Samhain, which is also in, the US, we often call Samhain Halloween. That's where it comes from. Modern Halloween was derived from ancient Samhain, which is, Samhain is the, again, Celtic name for that cross quarter day celebration when the veils are thin. So between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, we have Imbolc. Imbolc is said to be the beginning of spring energy coming. Obviously, it's still pretty cold. It's still, it still feels like winter, and we are still in winter season, and the spring starts at the spring equinox. But the celebration of Imbolc is celebrating that the days are starting to get longer, and there's maybe a little bit more warmth coming into the world, or at least there's more sun, and so it feels a little warmer, and it's the beginning of preparing for spring. Like, we've made it through winter. Our ancestors, our Celtic ancestors, I say that because I have Celtic ancestors, maybe you do or don't watching this, but our Celtic ancestors would have seen Imbolc and this kind of beginning of February time, which is when this falls, I'll get to that in a second, as an indication that, oh my goodness, we've already almost made it through winter. We are already almost at the coming of warmth and the ability to start growing more food, because for them, winter was a lot more dangerous and a lot more difficult than it is for us nowadays. I mean, and that's just true, right? It's not that big of a deal anymore for us. It's cold. You may or may not like winter, but it's not the same as it was for our ancestors who lived much closer to the earth, and therefore, like, during the winter, they just literally had way less resources than we have available to us now. So Imbolc would have been a time of celebration that the winter is almost over and the sun is coming back, and it's getting closer and closer to time to, like, plant the seeds and start having fresh food coming in. And it also was traditionally the time that livestock would start giving birth. And so there's like this birth element to Imbolc as well. And that's part of the celebration of life that happens with Imbolc. So, let's go back a little bit into what is Imbolc. Imbolc is a celebration. It is a cross quarter day, and it happens approximately around January 31st into February 1st. So I said that's approximate because that's like the calendar date that we mostly follow. If you follow the set in stone Gregorian calendar dates. Really, cross quarter days are astronomical alignments, and so generally most years Imbolc is not actually happening on the 31st to the 1st. That is like the symbolic date of it. The actual astronomical date this year, okay, So the astronomical point of Imbolc is like when the sun reaches about 15 degrees of Aquarius. So that actually looks like this year that's happening more at around the 4th of February. So the actual astronomical time of Imbolc is a little bit later than the January 31st into February 1st calendar date celebration. So what does that mean? That means that you can get as specific about Imbolc as you do or don't want to. You can use the calendar date of celebration, which is January 31st into February 1st. You celebrate overnight, or you could wait till more like February 3rd into February 4th or so. That's going to align a little bit more precisely with where the sun actually is when it's actually a cross quarter. The sun will be at that exact cross quarter point on February 4th. So why do we celebrate it? Why would you maybe consider acknowledging Imbolc? Well, it's for all the reasons that I've already said. It is a time when we start celebrating that spring is coming, that the light is coming, that the warmth is coming back. It is a celebration that we've made it through winter. And it is a celebration in the Celtic tradition of the goddess Brigid. Brigid is the most beloved goddess in the Celtic tradition, specifically in the Irish Celtic tradition, although Brigid is pretty well beloved in like the Scottish Celtic tradition. You can even see references to Brigid, often using the word like Brigantia or bride. You can see that in England as well. So Brigid is the goddess that is celebrated on Imbolc, and her story is essentially that she is taken away on Samhain, so end of October, beginning of November, and she spends the winter cooped up and hidden away. And on Imbolc, she is rescued and escapes, and she comes back across the land, and she is said to be bringing the spring back across the land as she escapes where she's been held away throughout the winter, and she brings spring and rebirth back to the land. Brigid is a goddess of mothers. She's a midwife. She is a healer. She's a poet or a bard. She's also a smith. So she has this like really strong, grounded, embodied, earthy presence. She's a very strong, powerful presence for the feminine and feminine energy. She has this warrior presence with the smith. Think of a smith as like making a sword or making weapons, right? So there is this embodied warrior within her, although that's not her only or main energy. She reminds us that life is coming and that there is new life that is on the way. And so the mythology that she walks across the land and she brings the life back to the land on the morning of Imbolc. And when you wake up on the morning of Imbolc, Brigid has walked across the land and she's blessed the land. And there's ways that you can honor her walking across the land. And blessing you and ask her for her blessings for your next year as well. So this is a really beautiful way to connect in with the goddess Brigid, and you may be aware of Brigid as she has been actually adopted into the sainthood by the Irish Catholic Church. The Saint Brigid comes from the goddess Brigid. She is such a beloved goddess that the Catholic Church pretty much had to adopt her in and make her into a saint in order to convince the ancient Irish to like follow along with Catholicism, because they were like, we're not giving up Brigid. So you may be familiar with her in that sense. So this is a really beautiful holiday to celebrate the coming end of winter and the beginning of spring that's on its way, and the healing that comes for us and that is offered to us as we move out of winter and into spring. I really personally love Imbolc. I really love celebrating the walk of Brigid across the land and the healing and the blessings that she brings, and honoring her as she walks across the land and brings those blessings and that healing forward for us to accept and to share out into the world around us, like into our communities as well, or into our families. So here's a few ways that you can connect in with Imbolc if you would like to honor it this year. First, I would recommend doing some research. It is really it is sacred to connect in with these holidays, with these, with these cross quarter days, with the solstices and the equinoxes, with the gods and goddesses that are connected into them in different mythologies and in different ancestral practices. If your ancestry is not Celtic, then you could probably very easily look up what your ancestors would have done around this time, because in general, most of our ancestors would have celebrated the solstices, equinoxes, and cross quarter days. That's how we lived. Our ancestors would have lived by the sun and the movement of the sun throughout the year. But I would recommend doing a little research of your own. If you feel really called to this Celtic connection and Imbolc and Bridget, do some research. Look up Bridget. Go watch some videos about her. Read some books about her. Read some articles. Bridget is a really beautiful sacred goddess, and so if you're going to call on her and honor her and ask for her support and her healing at Imbolc, take some time before you do that to actually get to know her a little bit. That's respectful. Otherwise, it's not very respectful to just randomly call on an energy, a goddess that you don't have any knowledge about beyond just learning a bit here from me. So I'm sharing this video as a way for you to get curious and get excited and think, oh, do I want to learn more? And if you do, go look up more about Bridget. Go learn more about her. Go get some connection into who she is. So that's the first thing I would recommend. And if you don't feel called to the Irish or the Scottish or the Celtic connection into this cross-quarter day, into Imbolc, go look up what your ancestors would have done. That is the number one thing when you start celebrating any of these days or these feast days, as they're often considered. Understand who and what your ancestors would have connected into. If you want to connect back to, pre our current religious practices, connect into what your ancestors would have believed and how they would have connected, because that's going to be your best guidance for how to do this in the most respectful, grounded, honest, honorable way. Okay, so if you are interested in getting to connect in with Bridget about a bit this year, and honoring her journey as she walks across the earth and brings light back, you start your honoring of Bridget the night before Imbolc. So Imbolc is the day of February 1st. So January 31st is the night that we honor Bridget, because she's going to walk across the earth on that night. So a really easy but beautiful way to honor Bridget is to get an electric candle. Be safe about this, right? Get an electric candle and place it in your window all night long, lighting the way for Bridget as she walks across the earth. And you can set the intention as you leave that candle that this is for Bridget. And if you really want to then take that a step further, set up an altar space for Bridget. Find a place, ideally a beautiful table or windowsill or something, where you can leave your candle, your electric candle lit for Bridget. And then you can also leave out offerings for Bridget. And so offerings are things like soda bread. If you go look up how to make soda bread, that's a really traditional Irish thing that you make for Imbolc. So make some soda bread and leave out a piece of soda bread, and butter or milk for Bridget. Butter, milk, specifically cow's milk and butter, because it is really a beautiful offering to leave out for a Celtic god or goddess, because cows and milk were sacred and were a sign of wealth, and so they were very important, and things that were that's a big deal to leave out as an offering. So honoring the ancestry, honoring the line of how this has been passed down, leaving out soda bread, leaving out butter, leaving out milk, leaving out cheese, but make it the real stuff. This is, again, make it the stuff that actually would have been important and mattered to our ancestors and to the gods and goddesses that we are connecting back into, in this case, Bridget. So cow's milk, right? Cow butter, cow cheese. That's the most ideal way to do this, right? The other thing you could do, for example, is you could leave out a glass of like beer, like a Guinness, right? If we're talking Celtic connection, Bridget, leave out a glass of beer as an offering. You could leave out something like an apple or potatoes or something else. You could use a little bit of your imagination here. You absolutely can do this in however you intuitively feel called to do so. I'm just giving you suggestions of things that would have, if you really want to stay connected to the ancestral practice of Imbolc, these are the things that would, what I'm suggesting are things that would be the most connected into the ancestral practice. But you're, of course, welcome to decide what is feasible for you to leave out as an offering. So you leave things out as an offering. Leave out some food, drink, and your candle for Bridget. And you leave it out overnight. You leave it out into the first. And then when that offering is complete, so by the end of the day on the first or the morning of the second, then you do not eat the offering. If you've never offered before to ancestors and to because you are offering in a sense to your ancestors as well here, especially, thinking of if you have Celtic ancestry, you're offering to Bridget, you're offering to your ancestors who would have celebrated Bridget's walk across the land as well. So you don't eat offerings. You would give them back to the earth, ideally. So put them outside, put them under a tree. Pour out, if you have milk or beer or something, pour out under the tree and give it back to the earth on the morning of the second. Okay, so that's a way to just easily and gently offer Bridget and give her an offering of energetic sustenance as she walks back across the earth and brings healing and brings blessings. The other thing that's really powerful and popular to do on Imbolc is you take a piece of cloth, and cloth or ribbon is really traditional here. And you put it outside. And you put it outside and you ask for Bridget to bless it as she walks across the earth. And so that she's blessing the earth and bringing life back to the earth, she's also blessing your cloth or your ribbon to bring healing and bring some of her healing magic, give some of her healing magic to that cloth or that ribbon. So there's a few ways you can do this. One of the traditional ways to leave out the cloth or the ribbon is to put it on your doorstep. Another way, and this is the way that I really like to do it, this is how one of my teachers taught me to do this when I was undergoing my shamanic training. I like to take the cloth or the ribbon and tie it in a tree. Because it's connected into then the natural world, and it's connected into a tree that is part of the earth that Bridget is bringing life back to. And so I really love the symbolism and connection of that. So I will generally take my cloth or my ribbon and I will tie it into a tree, and that's something that I have a lot of my students do as well. You also could do something like taking a shawl or a scarf and leaving it outside overnight and asking Bridget to bless it. Something that I do often is I take the ribbon or the cloth and I'll put it outside for Imbolc every year. I often get a new one because what I will do is I'll take like a piece of cloth or ribbon that I can cut up, and then I will take after Imbolc, I will take that blessed cloth and I'll cut up little pieces and give them as gifts to students, to friends, to family, to anyone who would appreciate that piece of Bridget and her healing being shared with them. So that's the most popular way to connect in with Imbolc and to connect in with Bridget, is to put something out, put a cloth or a shawl or a ribbon out to be blessed by Bridget as she walks across the earth. Okay. And then to experience the healing abilities of that cloth, because it's said that those cloths or the ribbons or whatever you use, when you put them outside and Bridget blesses them, it then is something you can use for healing throughout the year. So you could then take that cloth, for example, and say you have an emotional heartache, you have a heartbreak. You could wear that cloth under your shirt and ask for Bridget's help healing your heartbreak, and you would just wear it every day until you start to feel that heartbreak lessening and healing, right? You could also do the same thing. I have a sore throat. I'm going to put my Bridget's cloth on my throat and ask for Bridget's support in healing my body. And I just wear that cloth for as long as I need her support and her healing. Okay. So those are the ways that I would recommend honoring Bridget. If you wanted to do this in a community, if you wanted to do this with a group, then you could have a feast, have a potluck dinner, invite some of your friends around, and celebrate Bridget, and like celebrate, come together as communities celebrating the sun coming back. You know, your intention is to celebrate the blessing of Imbolc and the blessings of Bridget, and you take some of your food at the end of the night and you put it as an offering on an offering plate and you offer it to Bridget, and then you leave that out, you know, for the 24 hours or so, and you give it back to the earth like I already talked about. Another thing you can do, Imbolc is said to be a time of divination. So a really beautiful way to connect in with Imbolc and to connect into Bridget is you take a paper plate. This is something I learned from a Bridget scholar. And you can take this paper plate and you take a small candle and you place the plate in the threshold, like the opening, front door. And then you can divide the plate up into quarters, and you write in each quarter like home, money, love, friendship, career. Like you could divide it up into fourths or sixths or eighths, however many things you want to kind of divinate. What is the energy of this for this year, for this upcoming year? And then you burn the candle, you know, you light the candle, you ask for Bridget's assistance, and you ask for her to support you in this divination and seeing, you know, where's the energy going for me this year? And you let the candle burn down, you don't touch it. This can take a few hours. This is why you do get a small candle. And obviously you don't leave it unattended. And you see where the wax melts, and that gives you an idea of, like, say the wax really melts towards love. Well, this is probably gonna be a big year of love. Say the wax really melts towards like difficulties of some kind, right? Because you want to put you put good things, bad things, all things in there so you kind of see what's coming. Then you're like, okay, this might be a more challenging year. So that's a way that can be kind of fun to play with the divination of Imbolc. Also could be a fun time to play with like tarot cards or runes, or if you have a sacred relationship with any kind of tool like that, it could be a good night to pull some cards or pull some runes or do anything like that. Especially fun to do in community if you have people to do that with. And then when you go to bed at night, just say thank you to Bridget. Send her again, you know, support, blessings, thanks as she walks across the earth. And on the morning of February 1st, if you're celebrating from the 31st to the 1st, then you take your healing ribbon or your cloth that you left outside overnight, and that's your healing, you know, say thank you to Bridget, and that is your healing cloth ribbon for the rest of the year. And you're just aware of Imbolc. You just walk through the day with awareness of the celebration and the blessing that Imbolc brings, that February 1st day is bringing for you. And notice what blessings come for you that day and say thank you for them. You know, just acknowledge them, honor them, and just be aware what blessings are coming through on that day. Okay. So that is how we celebrate Imbolc, how you can tap into Imbolc and just kind of get to know the energy of Imbolc and celebrate it if you would like to. I hope that this is helpful. I hope that if you decide to celebrate Imbolc, you really enjoy it. I think it's such a beautiful cross-quarter day to acknowledge and honor, and to honor Bridget. Bridget is such a beautiful, beautiful goddess to connect in with. I highly recommend just getting to know her and looking her up and just getting to understand more of her mythology. There's a lot of mythology about Bridget. I've given you like the barest bones of it because it's just too complex to try and, for me to try and distill down into this. So if you feel called to celebrate Imbolc, go learn a bit more about Bridget, and everything that she is, and her mythology and her energy and her blessings. And if you choose to celebrate Imbolc, then I'm just sending you a lot of Imbolc blessings. Thanks for joining me with this little video, and I hope this is helpful.